Joining me now is Nevada Congressman Steven Horsford, a Democratic member of the House Ways and Means, Budget and Armed Services Committees. Congressman, welcome back to the broadcast. It's good to see you. As we have watched this tragedy in Afghanistan unfold from all angles this week, what do you expect the next few days to look like as Tuesday's August 31st deadline approaches? Are you confident that all Americans who want to leave the country will indeed get on a plane? And let me just clarify for those who are concerned about this. There are some Americans who are dual citizens. Their families are in Afghanistan. They cannot necessarily get their families out yet, and that may be a reason for which they choose to stay for now.
That's right. And thank you, Alex, for having me on. And first and foremost, I want to thank our service members who are doing everything that they can to help evacuate every U.S. citizen, our allies. I want to thank our veterans who have served in Afghanistan over the last 20 years and to commend them for their service. As you said, our first and foremost priority is to get every single U.S. citizen and ally and partner who fought alongside us out safely. We are working towards that by Tuesday on the military side, but it will continue after Tuesday on the diplomatic side. I believe that the president and the administration are doing everything that they can. Clearly, we have more than 105,000 people or more who have been evacuated to date. And we are working to make sure that every single person is evacuated safely.
And I know that you've been working, sir, in a collaborative way, you and your office with State Department and Pentagon officials. Tell me what's been the biggest challenge about trying to get Americans out and those Afghan allies.
Well, the most difficult part, of course, is the communication and the logistics. My office has been in direct contact with troops on the ground, as well as with the State Department and Defense, to help a spouse of a constituent of mine with a child that is a U.S. citizen. Unfortunately, it's been difficult to get them to the proper gate in order for them to be processed for evacuation. And so every single day, and in fact, multiple times a day, I have reached out to officials along with my staff to try to assist, along with many other constituents who have contacted our office for assistance.
Yeah, I'm sure you will not let up in that front. Let me ask you about the logic behind any Republicans who are calling for the president to resign or to be impeached over all of this. What's your response to that?
Well, my response, my question to them is, where's your patriotism? I remember after the attack on our country after 9/11, President Bush then asked our country to come together and to support our troops, to support our country, and to support our national interest. And I didn't agree with everything that President Bush stood for back then, but I didn't want our country to fail. I wanted him and our country and our service members to succeed. And we need that for President Biden, for our service members in our country. And so for Republicans who are trying to make this about partisanship or political brinksmanship, I would say put all that aside. Let us focus on every U.S. citizen and our allies getting out safely. There will be time enough for us to have congressional hearings on this process. But to be clear, this started under the previous administration and the deadline that they set for ending the war in Afghanistan.
Congressman, let me ask you about what we're seeing across the country all day today, these protests demanding the protection of voting rights. It's also marking the anniversary of Martin Luther King Jr.'s historic March on Washington. How meaningful is this?
You know, I saw your segment earlier, and it is energizing. This is the good trouble rally. This is what John Lewis stood for, what he, in fact, bled for on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And I want to commend my colleagues in the Congressional Black Caucus, our chairwoman, Joyce Beatty, Terry Sewell, G.K. Butterfield, and so many others who have worked to bring forward the John Lewis Voting Rights Enhancement Act. I'm proud to be a sponsor of that bill, along with the For the People Act. But others have already said what this means and what it stands for. It is our most fundamental right, which is our right to vote. But it's not only about voting rights, it's also about labor rights. It's about civil rights. It's about women's rights. And we can't pass any of the important legislation unless we protect our right to vote. And that is why the Senate needs to take up both the John Lewis Voting Rights Act as well as the For the People Act. They need to pass it so that President Biden can sign it so that we can prevent these. There are 18 states this year alone who have passed more than 30 laws to try to suppress the rights of people to vote. And those people that they're trying to suppress are largely women, people of color, seniors, and young people. Why? Because they know that when we vote, our issues will be at the top of the agenda, and we must continue to fight for our democracy and for our future.
Let me ask you about the Supreme Court blocking the CDC from enforcing the federal eviction freeze on renters. I know your Democratic colleague Cori Bush tweeted this in response in part to it. If they think this partisan ruling is going to stop us from fighting to keep people housed, they're wrong. Congress needs to act immediately for every unhoused or soon-to-be unhoused person in our districts. Congressman, how can Congress act? How is this going to impact your constituents?
Well, I agree with my colleague Cori Bush. I commend her for standing up and sleeping outside of the U.S. Capitol to bring attention to this. And I joined with her in calling for the administration to act, which they ultimately did, to extend that eviction moratorium. We are in the middle of a pandemic. No family, and especially a child, should be evicted in the middle of a public health crisis. Growing up as a child, I've experienced these forms of impact and trauma, and I never want another child or family to have to experience that. Since last year, I have voted for $46 billion of rental relief to go to our local governments. And quite honestly, we need to get more of that money out faster. We have small landlords who cannot afford to continue to cover the expense, and they also need help. So we are working with our local officials. I am in my state and with local officials to help them get that rental assistance out. But we need a federal response, and I know that Chairwoman Maxine Waters and our leadership are working to bring additional legislative measures to the House for our full consideration, because we cannot allow any family, and especially children, to be evicted and become unhoused in the middle of a pandemic, a public health crisis.
Congressman, I have one last quick question on infrastructure. With the House having passed that $3.5 trillion budget resolution, this is after Speaker Pelosi struck the deal with moderate Democrats for that floor vote scheduled for September 27th. Moderates have certainly been fighting to pass the bipartisan bill, but even as this deal is struck, progressives are standing firm, saying they're only going to vote for infrastructure after passing the reconciliation bill. Where do you stand on all this, and are you at all concerned about some sort of a logjam before September 27th?
Absolutely not, Alex. Look, Democrats, we're united. We have an agenda. It's the Republicans that don't stand for anything. You know, when they were in charge, the only thing they wanted to do was to give tax cuts to the very wealthy and the big corporations. Under Democratic majority in the House and the Senate, and with the Democrat in the White House, we are actually working to pass a bipartisan infrastructure bill. We are working to deliver child care support to families, creating millions of jobs in the infrastructure package, helping to make the child tax credit permanent, helping to lift more than 50% of children out of poverty, making sure that we make paid leave available to families who need it, lowering the cost of prescription drugs, particularly for our seniors, and taking the savings from the reduced cost and expanding benefits for Medicare recipients by including dental, vision, and hearing. This is what Democrats stand for when we're in the majority. The American people, and making sure that their lives are improved and that we are fighting for the people. That is what we're about, and we're united, and we are going to get that job done.
Okay, good to hear. Nevada Congressman Steven Horsford, thank you so much. Good to see you.